Okay, looks like the video came out pretty good. The audio sounds great compared to without this microphone. So we're looking at Matthew chapter 5 and verse 19. And if you're watching this video for the first time and you're not watching them in order, um, then what I would recommend is that you go ahead and begin with prayer and ask God's Spirit to draw near, to open our minds so that we can understand His Word more clearly. So earlier we talked about Jesus said that I am not come to destroy the law, but I'm coming to fulfill it. So, and that's in Matthew 5, verse 17. He says it once and then he says it twice. So he's clearly not destroying the law, which is, God's 10 Commandments. And then he even says that if you teach someone else to break God's law, then you will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But if you do and teach them, you will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. So Jesus now is going to go in and look exactly. We're going to go in now and look to see exactly what Jesus is talking about when he says he's going to fulfill it. So when he says he's going to fulfill it, what does he mean? He is speaking in regards to uh, fulfilling it, and it says in verse 20, "For I say unto you that except your righteousness exceed the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees, you shall in no case enter into the kingdom of heaven." So here it's clear to see that Jesus said that you have to have better righteousness than the scribes and the Pharisees. So the scribe was the person who wrote the Bible, and the Pharisee was the person who interpreted what the Bible meant. So Jesus is saying here it's not good enough just to write the Bible. It's not good enough just to interpret the Bible. He wants something more than this. Jesus puts them both together. It's not just the interpretation, and it's not just the writing of the scriptures that makes you righteous. There's more to it. And this is exactly what Jesus is going to talk about. And he gets right into it in verse 21. It says, "You have heard that it has been said of them of old time, you shall not kill. But I say unto you that whosoever shall kill shall be in danger of the judgment. But I say unto you that whosoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment. And whosoever shall say to his brother, Raca, shall be in danger of the council. But whosoever shall say, Thou fool, shall be in danger of the hellfire." So here, again, like I mentioned in the first video, if you say that you are, uh, you know, oh, if I'm angry with my brother, then I'm supposed to kill my brother. That's what it's technically saying here. But if you read the context, Jesus is asking for more. He's saying here in the old times it said, "Do not kill." Jesus is saying here that even the thoughts of anger, even those thoughts are wrong. And those, where does anger start? Anger starts from the heart. Anger is something that starts from the heart and then it turns into the action. So it's not just right to have the right actions, but we have to have the right mindset. We have to have the right heart. The Bible says that, "Oh, that my people had a heart to follow after my commandments and to keep my law." So Jesus is saying here, the old times it said, "Do not kill," which is the law. Jesus wants it to go further. He says, "Don't even be angry with your brother without a cause." And then he goes again in verse 23. He says, "Therefore, if you bring your gift to the altar, and there remember that your brother has aught or something against thee, leave there thy gift before the altar, go thy way, first be reconciled to thy brother, and then come and offer thy gift." So in verse 23 and 24, Jesus is making another point. The Pharisees and the scribes of that time, they made a big deal about paying their tithe, their 10% every single time. Jesus is not saying don't pay the tithe. What he is saying is that he wants the heart first and let the actions be a result of a changed heart. So he says here in verse 23, "You remember that you have something against your brother. Go get it straightened out. Come to God, come to the altar in a pure heart, in a pure mind." That's what Jesus is saying. Now, verse 25, it says, agree with thine adversary quickly, while as thou art in the way with him, lest at any time the adversary deliver thee to the judge, and the judge deliver thee to the officer, and thou be cast into prison. So 25 here is a 25 and 26. It says, verily I say unto you, you shall no means come out of there until you have paid the uttermost farthing. So it says, agree with your adversary quickly while you are in the way. The way back then was the main road that went from city to city. So Jesus here is saying that agree with your adversary when you're in the way with him, because something could happen, and right away, since you're in the matter of the situation, you just right away they're just gonna take you to jail, or or they're gonna take it in their own hands because they're your enemy. They'll at that time they had their swords and armies and all that. They probably would have started fighting right there. So Jesus says here, agree with them while you're in the way, because there's a proper time and a proper place for everything. We see that in Ecclesiastes. There's a time for everything. A time to live, a time to die, a time to rejoice, a time to weep, a time to give, a time to take, a time to save, a time to give that which is saved. So there's a lot of meaning that Jesus is saying here. So he says, agree with them while you're in the way, and then actually fix the problem later on. Because someone who comes up to you and they're already mad at you, whether you're right or not, you're not going to be able to make a point to them anyways, because they're not going to listen, because they're already agitated, they're already against what you have to say. Okay, so in 27, again, we're looking at another thing. It says, it has been heard that it has been said by them of old time, you shall not commit adultery. So again, that's one of the 10 Commandments. So when Jesus was talking about the law earlier, he's clearly talking about the 10 Commandment law. And then verse 28, Jesus says, but verily I say unto you, that whosoever looks on a woman to lust after her in his heart has committed adultery already in his heart. So again, Jesus here is saying that if you don't actually commit adultery, but but in the action, but the actual heart is doing the same thing, then your heart is not in it. So you're doing it in your heart. Jesus wants the heart. He wants us to be in a marriage. This would be an example of a marriage. So in a marriage, you want someone to be fully and 100% committed in their marriage. They don't want to be in a point where they would be like not fully committed and then end up committing adultery, because that's what will end up happening. If somebody is, looking at somebody else, male or female, depending upon, which gender, um, the fact is that it simply comes down to you keep thinking certain ways. What you think is what you are. In verse 29, the Bible says, if thy right eye offend thee or cause thee to offend, pluck it out and cast it from thee, for it is more profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish than that thy whole body should be cast into hell. And then it says, if thy right hand offend thee or cause thee to offend, cut it off and cast it from thee, for it is more profitable for one of thy members should perish than that the whole body should be cast into hell. So 29 and 30 are basically saying the same thing, that if you're actually doing the wrong thing, Jesus says to cast it out. It's something like if you're a former drinker and going to the bar causes you to think and causes you to want to sin, to go back to the old life that you didn't want to do, then Jesus is saying that cut it off and cast it from you. Get rid of don't go to the bar anymore. Just that simple. Don't go to a place where you're tempted to sin. In verse 31, it says, and it has been said by them of old time, whosoever shall put away his wife, let him give her a writing of divorcement. But I say unto you, that whosoever shall put away his wife, saving for the cause of fornication, causes her to commit adultery. And whosoever shall marry her that is divorced, commits adultery. This one here, it's pretty clear. If for fornication, uh, they cause basically if you marry into somebody who has been uh, divorced other than the cause of fornication, the Bible here is saying you're causing the other one to commit adultery. In 33, it says, Again you have heard that it has been said by them of old time, You shall not forswear thyself, but shall perform unto the Lord thine oaths. Jesus says in 34, But I say unto you, swear not at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is his footstool, nor by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And it says, Neither shalt thou swear by thy head, because you cannot make one hair white or black. So really, when it comes down to it, how much control do we really have as people? In verse 37, Jesus says, But let your communication be yea, yea, or nay, nay. So basically, it's yes, yes, or no, no. And whatsoever is more than this comes of evil. So obviously, we're not going to, talk yes, yes, no, 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 yes, yes. Obviously, we're not going to do that. So what Jesus is saying here is that our conversations need to be clear and concise. Don't run around the bush. Be straightforward with people. Um, don't be half-hearted. And in verse 38, it says, You have heard that it has been said, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you that you resist not evil, and whosoever shall smite thee on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. So, to get in the right thought pattern here, in verse 38, it says, You have heard that it has been said, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. So in the Old Testament, if someone knocked out someone's tooth from fighting, they could go up and knock the other person's tooth out. Just evil for evil, or good for good, either one. So the idea that's being presented here is that you resist not evil. So just because someone does evil to you, it doesn't mean that you have to do evil back to them. The Bible tells us that vengeance belongs unto the Lord. I will repay, says the Lord of hosts. Um, Another thing too, the Romans would only smite with their, I believe it was their left hand. So if you, yeah, so somebody could smite with their left hand on the right cheek. So they wouldn't be able to hit you on the right cheek, on the other cheek, basically with the other hand. So turn to him the other also is just making the point that if someone wants to cause evil, I say turn so that as you're walking away, but they would only smite with their left hand on your right cheek. So turn to him the other also. Jesus is saying don't resist evil, just because what can you do about it? If you're in this situation, you're actually in and you're standing before a Roman guard, which is what the Jews were dealing with constantly. It's not like they're going to be able to get away. Those Roman guards are armed. There's absolutely no way. So just allow them to do what they're going to do, and then walk away. And 14, it says, or let them walk away actually. In verse 40, it says, if any man will sue thee at the law and take away that coat, let him have that cloak also. So that verse there is basically give more than what people ask for. So they wore two coats back then. One was for the outer garment, and the other one was like an undergarment. And then like men still had their underwear or whatever you call it on top of that. So, and then 41 it says, Whosoever shall compel thee to go to you with a mile, go with him twain or two. So Jesus is saying here that the soldiers could force a Jew to carry his gear for 1 mile. Jesus is saying here, carry it for 2 miles. Go above and beyond the call of duty. So we're going to go and continue on the next verse.